All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Thank you for your attendance at the special meeting. We have an apology from Councillor Ingrid Jackson. Councillor Joe Jurizovic has requested that he participate by teleconference. So we need to move a motion that in accordance with section 276 of the local government regulation, Councillor Jurizovic, hang on, we'll get there, is approved to attend the meeting by teleconference. Who said that? Councillor Wilkie. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Stockwell. I'll put the motion. All those in favour. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, certainly.
Does Councillor Jurizovic have to stand up when he... No.
Yes. And because we have yet to make the changes to our previous resolution with regard to live streaming, we also need to make a resolution today to live stream the meeting that we're having right now that's already being live streamed.
I'll move it, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Councillor Wilkie, seconded by Councillor Pardon. The resolution, the motion is that Council agree to live stream and record the special meeting today.
The first one is to suspend standing
orders. Better suspend standing orders, I beg your pardon, yes, quite right. So the motion is that the operation of standing orders be suspended in order to deal with the issue of live streaming. That's been moved by Councillor Wilkie, seconded by Councillor Pardon. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, thank you, that's carried. Now we need to go to the motion to agree to live stream. Moved Councillor Wilkie, he's quick today, seconded Councillor Stockwell. So this is the motion to agree to live stream. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, thank you, that's carried. We now need to resume standing orders. Moved Councillor Glasgow, seconded Councillor Pardon. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, thank you. Standing orders are now resumed and we can continue with the agenda. And the first item is with regard to tenders for the Tewantin Administration Building roof refurbishment. We have Christine and Carl here. Any questions?
Oh, Mr.
Councillor Pardon.
The only comment I'd make, obviously weather is the highest risk in my opinion, and it seems to me that there's, although we go back over 5 years with regards to the roof, back to Sunshine Coast Council days when the roof should be replaced. I'm not a weather prophet, and little boys who tell lies grow up to be weather forecasters, so I don't know what their view is going forward, but I would personally I'd do it in June, July, August, and I know we've been waiting and waiting, but there was just when I read the report that sort of jumped out at me.
Okay, we'll get a response. Luckily there aren't any professional meteorologists in the room who were insulted, but Carl or Chris, with regard to wet weather, what are the contingency plans?
Generally, we start moving out of the storm season towards the into April. April is really the end of the storm season. However, we sometimes do get a storm event through April. We could move it, delay the project but it would take it into the next financial year as well. So I think the risk is probably minimal. We've got to bear in mind as well that the work is being carried out over the top of the existing roof. So while it might delay works, we are not going to have an issue with water ingress if we did have a storm event.
That's good to know.
Okay, any other questions? Maybe.
I have a question.
Yes, Councillor Jurizovic.
I posed a question to the CEO with regard to the figures in the recommendation and the figures in the finance section of the report differ significantly, and I asked for clarification on that. An email was received which related to GST being in the finance figures. I'm just wondering whether those figures were circulated to all councillors and whether those amended figures are available.
It's my understanding that those figures only came back to yourself in response to your query. Just to answer your question, the difference, as explained, was that the figures in the finance section included GST. The figures in the recommendation don't, which is the way it should be.
Okay, just for the benefit of other councillors, if they saw a discrepancy there, they can see that where that discrepancy comes from.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Councillor Pardon.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I also saw that discrepancy. So in the motion, or that will become the motion before us, With regards to that 701,000, and then when we go to page 5, so that's the contingency in the whole shooting box that adds up to 814. That's what it seems to be saying there. But I was just wondering if that shouldn't be written somewhere in the recommendation or motion. It's a bit confusing, that's all.
Yes,
Just
look,
a question on page.
Yeah, I can answer that. The recommendation deals with the award of the tender, which is the 701,000. When you go down to the provisions in finance, if you have a look at the second item there, the tendered contract value, that's the 771.
Yeah.
So that's with the GST figure, the 10% GST. So what we're doing at this meeting is approving the tender. The other elements of the project cost don't relate to that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So just to clarify, Mr. CEO, on page 5, it does say their cost excluding GST.
It does.
The tendered contract value is listed there as 771, but relating that back to the 701 on page 3, that would suggest that it is inclusive of GST.
That's correct, and that's what I explained before. The number there does include GST on page 5.
Okay, thank you.
However, as Councillor Parton correctly states there, it says excluding GST in the table on page 5. So that table on page 5 is in fact incorrect. It should be corrected to say including GST or be amended to those figures that were presented to me.
Well, I think it's all been cleared up, Councillor Jurizovic. We don't go and amend, obviously, a report. Once the report is tabled and we're dealing with a resolution. So as long as everyone around the table is now clear as to where the GST is and isn't included, then I think we can proceed. Any other questions? Yep, Councillor Stockwell.
It's probably one more for Councillor Zero Emissions Officer, but the acceptance of small-scale technology certificate rebate, does that have any future implications in terms of claiming the emissions reduction?
I can't answer that. I don't know the answer.
Can we take that on notice, Councillor Stockwell?
Yeah, it's just one thing we have to think about when we're doing these things. And
Yeah.
some of those,
All right.
basically, you're selling your emissions rebate, your emissions saved to other people. Yeah.
Just another question.
Yeah, Councillor
For
Wilson.
those who may be following this, back to the recommendation, the lump sum price of 701,000 excluding GST and a final contract price of 649. Can you just explain what that means? We're actually consenting to approve the lump sum price of 701 plus the additional costs on page 5 for a total project cost of 814. Is that correct?
No, what the recommendation, all this report is dealing with is the tender.
Yeah.
For this. It doesn't deal with the cost of the supervising, all the other costs associated with that project.
Yeah.
So the lump sum price, the 701,000, is the cost of doing the physical works on the roof with the contractor, and then that cost comes down to council with that small scale technology certificate rebate. So there are other costs associated with this project, but that's not what the council is approving today, because that's already part of staff costs and
Already
other things.
budgeted for.
Correct.
Thank you,
Yep.
Mr. CEO.
It's only the tender that's being assessed today.
Thank you.
So in terms of budget, that will be dealt with at budget sessions.
Yep.
Kim Rawlings, I see Annie Nolan's arrived. Did you want to try and deal with that previous question of Councillor Stockwell's?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. Councillor Stockwell just asked the question if we accept the small technology certificate rebates, whether that has any implication for future claim on the emissions.
No. Sorry, no. The small scale technology certificates actually comes off the total price of that, and that doesn't actually impact on the renewable energy targets overall.
Thank you. Nice work. Well done, Kim.
Just me, with your indulgence, I might ask Chris for just a quick question as well in terms of the impact on the top floor of the building, because councillors are on this floor as well. It's going to impact on this meeting room and other parts of the top floor where you have your offices. So I might just get Chris to outline the process about how we're going to work over this couple of months and what the potential impacts might be.
Absolutely. So obviously working level 3, the roof's being replaced, so there's going to be some noise implications, possible crane lifts, etc. across the building. So we've started a working group with key stakeholders in level 3
to ascertain things like when council meetings are, and possible relocations for staff. So within the budget for the cost, we've identified some areas where we might potentially have to relocate staff to other areas, whether it be maybe using internal offices such as the leisure centre, possibly the Noosa Library, those kind of areas, and off-site meetings with the councillors, etc., should the need arise, if the noise becomes too unbearable, etc. So
in a nutshell, it's going to be disruptive for a few months.
As this is a potential 3-month project.
How much of the period, Chris, might prevent residents from being able to access the top floor, and will have to make arrangements for other access? Can you?
As part of the working group, we've worked with customer service to work on times for the area to be closed and reopened again, as we're doing works around the roof. There will be times when the level 3 will be closed to the public, and then working with Jason and Ken to get the message out to the public to say, you know, we're relocating customer service to level 2,
right,
and having the correct signage and etc. and people in place to deal with that.
So when they can't access through the front door here, they might be able to access down level 2 along the driveway.
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah.
That's good. Any other questions, folks?
Put a tent up down on the river for the councillors' room.
Move Councillor Glasgow, seconded Councillor Pardon. I'll just read for the sake of the tape. The motion is that Council note the report by the Building Facilities Coordinator to the special meeting and award the contract to Midson Constructions Proprietary Limited for the initial lump sum price of $701,786 excluding GST, and a final contract price of $649,978 excluding GST following the small scale technology certificate rebate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. We go to the second and last item on the agenda, and that is the Planning and Environment Court Appeal with regard to proposed clearing of vegetation in David Low Way, access and offset planting in Beach Reserve. Thank you, Kerry. Before we proceed, councillors, I just want to remind you all that if councillors choose to deal with matters that aren't included in the report and veer off into issues that relate to legal tactics, we will have to move into confidential session and cease the live streaming. Hopefully we won't have to do that, but just keep that in mind so that if you imagine you want to talk about something that might be confidential, legally problematic, then we'll have to consider how we deal with it. Councillor Stockwell's moving the recommendation so quickly.
I'll second it.
Seconded Councillor Glasgow. Are there any questions for staff on this?
Just a question, Miss
Councillor Wilkie.
I'd like to, if you could just clarify the status of the land from which the public land from which the vegetation is proposed to be removed from, to allow better sight lines for access to the proposed subdivision, please.
We are trustee for the land, so it is state land, but we are trustee, so we're responsible for its maintenance and anything that occurs on that site.
Yeah. The actual status of the land, is it like on the western side, is that part of the national park, for example, or is it open space conservation? I'm talking more about the zoning of the land on this diagram here.
Okay, so sorry, just to clarify, we're talking about the area that's in orange that's proposed to be cleared?
Yes.
Okay, that's road reserve.
Road reserve.
Yeah, so it is road reserve. So it's not part of National Park.
Yes.
But that area's certainly got quite intact vegetation, coastal vegetation. Some of it's actually better than what's actually found on the site, that part of the site.
So by intact you mean native vegetation?
Yes, intact meaning also that it's not weed infested. So there are parts of this site that are quite weed infested because of the existing 2 houses, allowing sort of domestic planting sort of go off into the bush.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yep, Councillor Stockwell.
Yeah, I will talk briefly to the motion. It's important we recognise that this motion is with council is its role, not as the planning assessment role, but the road authority, and also in terms of our roles in the adjacent beachland reserve. I think it's really important to understand that when we're managing our roads, we manage for multiple different objectives, and one of them is to maintain the magnificent character of the drive down David Low Way. The extent of the clearing proposed by this development, which we previously refused, is such that one of the most iconic parts of David Low Way would be forever changed. And I think as a road authority, it's really important that we make it really clear to the court that we would not see that as the appropriate way ahead, as in item number 1. Nor do we think that allowing developers to offset any removal of vegetation with plantings on the beachland reserve in areas which have been cleared, perhaps without any prior approval over those clearings, is to me an important precedent not to set. And so item number 3 is, I think, quite important to state really categorically that we do not accept offsets in such circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Wilkie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, this is one of the 3 to 4% of development applications that comes before the full council recommended for refusal. This is an appeal that follows that. It would have involved a subdivision on the eastern side of what is one of the most picturesque drives in the Shire. But the pivotal reason that I support this motion before us at the moment is that in order for it to function properly would require the removal of significant amounts of vegetation on public land, again on the roadside of one of the most picturesque drives in the Shire, which is unfortunate. So I do support the recommendation for the motion for those reasons.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Do you wish to close, Councillor Stockwell? I'm just going to read the motion, and it reads that Council note the report by the Manager of Development Assessment to the special meeting dated 7th of March regarding Planning and Environment Court Appeal number 456/2018, and instruct its solicitor to advise the court and the appellant as follows. 1. As road authority for the area, that it does not accept nor will it permit the removal of vegetation and the maintenance thereof into the future for the purpose of achieving sight lines in David Low Way as proposed by the traffic engineers in their joint report of 21st of December. 2. That it will not allow site access in the location presently proposed by the appellant's development proposal. And 3. As trustee of the adjoining beach reserve, that it does not accept the appellant's proposal to provide offset planting in the beach reserve, nor will it undertake any responsibility for maintenance thereof into the future. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. The motion is carried. Was that a yes from you, Joe, I heard there?
Yes from me.
Beautiful, thank you. That concludes the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.